There is a lot of frustration and finger pointing with what's become New Mexico's largest and most destructive wildfire at this point. So here's the good news first. The growth has really slowed lately on the Calf CanyonHermits Peak Fire. Containment is at 54%. But both of those fires, before they eventually merged, started from U.S. Forest Service prescribed burns. And 4 investigator Brittany Costello is digging into those burn plans as New Mexicans question why the feds went ahead with them.
This is horrific, what's happening to New Mexicans.
When I heard that the fire was started by a prescribed fire, I thought, what were these guys thinking?
You walk out there, the ground crunches. I've never been on the moon, but that's how I would describe it to somebody, that you're walking on the moon out there.
Toby Dolan is a retired state police officer who moved to the small village of Rosiada more than 20 years ago for the serenity and the once beautiful view from home to Hermits Peak, a mountain now better known for destruction, a fire at the base of its grandeur. It's devoured everything in its path. His house, his mother's house, and his grandmother's too.
We had previously evacuated some of our belongings and mementos out of the house. And so we put that stuff back when they had it 91% contained. And so we made the quick trip to Texas, and it burned down before we could even get back.
The Hermits Peak Fire started as a prescribed burn by the United States Forest Service, part of a larger project to protect and improve the Gallinas watershed near Las Vegas. But the same day crews lit the match, it grew into a wildfire that later merged with the Calf Canyon fire. That fire started from a U.S. Forest Service prescription pile burn that somehow reignited from months earlier. Together, the two continue to consume more than 300,000 acres.
They are professionals, and I respect that very much. But obviously it was a risky thing to do, given the dryness of this year.
Tom Reby worked for the National Park Service for years, doing prescribed burns in California and here in New Mexico.
I can't imagine that the place was actually what we call in prescription, which means that the conditions were right to do this.
We requested a copy of the burn plan in this case. It's a plan that details prescription parameters and conditions. It has to be done before lighting that match, but what we got back was incomplete. The plan is dated 2018. It details numerous planned burns within the Gallinas watershed, including burns for Calf Canyon and Las Despensas, the burn eventually renamed Hermits Peak.
The first thing that jumped out at me was the plan was written back in 2018. Apparently. It may have been revised since then, but there's no evidence of that they wrote down. Conditions
in New Mexico have gotten worse over the years. The state is experiencing an exceptional drought.
It has been way more windy. We know that, for this spring across New Mexico as a whole.
Scott Overpeck with the National Weather Service says the agency provided a spot forecast to the Forest Service for this burn. It showed the potential for high wind gusts and low relative humidity.
Relative humidity, how dry the air is. So really dry air, less than 10 to 15%. Really helps those fires be able to grow.
What was really missing with this spot forecast and it not being a red flag warning was the sustained winds. Is that correct?
Correct.
Here's how it compares to the guidelines set in the plan. The spot forecast called for cooler temps, but the potential for lower than 12% relative humidity and the potential for 25-mile-per-hour wind gusts, the threshold for high fire intensity.
Unfortunately, it's the burn boss who's really on the hot seat here, because he or she is a person who makes the decision to go or not to go with a burn.
State government is calling for the feds to own up and pay for the destruction they've caused, something Toby Dolan wants too.
I spent a 20-plus year career in law enforcement trying to protect the people of this community, them and their property, and then to have a federal agency come in here and be negligent and jeopardize that, it's just beyond my belief.
But there's no getting back what's gone.
From things that my dad gave me, who I lost 11 years ago, a saddle of my great-grandfather's, some of my son's Army metals.
Now just a pile of rubble they can't even afford to clean up. A home they've learned they won't be able to replace.
Over the course of the last 2 years of inflation, we've now found out that we're $100,000 underinsured just on the house alone.
A future that's about as unpredictable as New Mexico wind in the springtime. Brittany Costello, 4 Investigates.
And the National Weather Service did provide the actual observations for the day of the prescribed burn back in April. It showed the average wind a little higher than forecasted and wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour.